In 1968, the streets of Newcastle, England, seemed like any other working-class neighborhood. The daily hustle and bustle, children playing in the streets, and the quiet hum of normal life filled the air. But that summer, the town would be shaken to its core by a crime so chilling, so incomprehensible, that it would echo across the nation for years to come. And what made this case truly unbelievable was the age of the perpetrator. The criminal responsible for two horrifying murders was not an adult, but a child, a 10-year-old girl. This is the story of Mary Bell, the young girl who shocked the world by taking the lives of two innocent boys, Martin Brown and Brian Howe. But Mary's story is not just one of cold-blooded murder. It's also the tragic tale of a deeply disturbed child whose own life was marked by unimaginable trauma, neglect, and abuse long before she committed her horrific acts. Born on May 26, 1957, Mary Flora Bell's early years were a waking nightmare. Her mother, Betty, was just 17 when she gave birth to Mary. Betty worked as a sex worker, often absent from home, and reportedly tried to kill Mary more than once in her early childhood. On one occasion, Mary was allegedly thrown out of a window by her mother. On another, she was forced to ingest pills. Despite these incidents, which were brushed off as accidents, Mary survived. Her father, Billy Bell, was not Mary's biological father, and his presence in her life did little to alleviate her suffering. Billy was a violent man, in and out of prison, and Mary's life at home became a toxic environment of physical and emotional abuse. This environment of chaos and trauma would deeply affect her, shaping her young mind in dark and disturbing ways. Mary began to exhibit troubling behavior from an early age. She was known to lash out violently at other children, choking and hurting them, yet no one intervened. To her teachers, she seemed withdrawn and cold. Her emotions seemed shut off, as if she had built a wall between herself and the world, a coping mechanism, perhaps, for the emotional turmoil she was enduring. Then came May 25, 1968. The day before her 11th birthday, Mary Bell would commit her first murder. 4-year-old Martin Brown was found dead inside a derelict house. His small, lifeless body lay on the floor, and although there were no clear signs of violence, his death shocked the community. At first, investigators were baffled. There was no obvious cause of death, and initial examinations suggested it might have been an accident. With no witnesses and no clear evidence of foul play, the case seemed destined to remain an unsolved mystery. But that was just the beginning. Just a few days after Martin's death, a chilling event took place at a local nursery school. The school had been broken into, and inside the police found a series of disturbing notes. The messages were crude but chillingly clear. "I murder so that I may come back." These were no idle threats or pranks. These were the first signs pointing directly to Mary Bell. Despite these ominous notes, the police had no concrete evidence to link Mary to Martin's death. That is, until another tragedy struck. 2 months later, on July 31, 1968, Mary struck again. This time, her victim was 3-year-old Brian Howe, a young boy from her neighborhood. Brian's body was found in a wasteland near his home. Unlike Martin's death, this time there was no ambiguity. Brian had been strangled. The child's body was also mutilated, and a pair of scissors had been used to cut his hair and leave marks on his body. It was a brutal, senseless crime, committed by a young girl who seemed to have no regard for life. The evidence at the scene began to paint a grim picture. Tiny fingerprints were found on Brian's neck, indicating that a child had committed the crime. Suspicion soon fell on Mary Bell, and when the police brought her in for questioning, her behavior was chilling. She was detached, unemotional, and disturbingly fascinated with the details of the murder. She even led Brian Howe's family in a search for the missing boy, all the while knowing exactly where his body lay. But what truly raised alarm bells were Mary's comments to the police. When questioned about Brian's death, she coldly remarked that he had a sore throat, as if that explained why he had been strangled. She also told police they would find scissors at the scene, something only the killer would know. It didn't take long for the police to arrest Mary Bell, along with her friend Norma Bell, no relation, who had been with her during the time of the murders. Norma was involved, but to a lesser degree, and would later be acquitted. However, Mary's role in both murders was undeniable. The police had their killer, a child who had taken the lives of two innocent boys. The trial of Mary Bell began in December 1968. The British public was horrified by the details of the case. The very idea that a young girl could commit such brutal crimes was incomprehensible to most. The defense argued that Mary had suffered from severe psychological trauma, shaped by years of abuse, neglect, and violence in her home. She was described as a deeply disturbed child who lacked the capacity to understand the full impact of her actions. Psychiatrists who examined Mary diagnosed her with psychopathy and said she displayed manipulative tendencies, showing no empathy or remorse for her victims. The prosecution, however, portrayed her as a cold, calculating murderer. In the end, the jury found Mary guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility rather than murder. She was sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, a sentence without a fixed term, allowing for her release when it was deemed safe. Mary Bell spent the next 12 years in various institutions, including a women's prison and a secure facility for young offenders. Her behavior during her incarceration was troubling at times, but eventually in 1980, at the age of 23, Mary Bell was released on license. Her release was met with outrage by many. People could not understand how someone who had committed such heinous crimes could ever be allowed to walk free. But Mary's story didn't end there. In 1998, when her identity was nearly exposed by the press, Mary Bell was granted lifelong anonymity by the British courts. This was later extended to include her daughter when she became a mother. Mary now lives a quiet life under an assumed identity, her past hidden from those around her. The case of Mary Bell raises difficult questions about the nature of childhood trauma and its potential to lead to unimaginable acts of violence. Was Mary Bell truly a cold-blooded killer, or was she herself a victim of the horrors she endured? Her story forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality of what can happen when a child is raised in an environment filled with abuse, neglect, and emotional suffering. So, what do you think? Was justice truly served in the case of Mary Bell, or is this a tragic story of a lost child who never stood a chance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe.